very welcome, Peter. It's so great that you could be with us tonight.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, albeit virtually. I'm actually would you believe, in the south of Spain at the moment.
Oh.
So I couldn't be much further away. Just out my window is the Mediterranean.
Oh, well then the weather is probably a lot nicer with you than with us. We have rain and fog, and it's very much crime fiction weather, I would say, here in Sundsvall, Sweden right now. Well, I thought we should mainly talk tonight about your novel Blowback that was published in 2011, because this is a novel that has been recently released here in Sweden under the title Stjärnkocken, meaning the star chef. Do you still remember Blowback?
Just about. Yes. I think I've written about 27 books now. So, but yes, no, I remember very clearly when I set off to do my research for that book. It was because I live in southwest France, and of course the book takes place up on the Central Plateau in France, and I left one December morning to drive up to that area to find my locations and do my research for the local town and everything. And it was snowing, and it was just a terrible day. And I followed a snowplow along the motorway to get to where I was going. And so, yes, I have a very vivid recollection of that book.
Perfect. Well, for this novel, for Blowback, you choose quite an unusual setting for a crime novel. It's set in a 3-star Michelin restaurant. Are you a foodie yourself, or how did you end up writing a novel about this type of setting?
Oh, I definitely enjoy my food. Yes. It was. I was trying to write in this series of books featuring Enzo MacLeod. I was trying to write about different aspects of cultural life in France. And, the second book in that series is all about wine. And for that, I went and did a lot of research. I had to drink a lot of wine, obviously. A writer has to make certain sacrifices for his job. And obviously, cuisine is something France is world renowned for. And about an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where I live, there is a 3-star Michelin restaurant. The chef is Michel Brass, and he is published. He publishes various books on cuisine, and he is published by my same publisher, the French publisher. So I asked her if she could have a word with him and get me permission to spend 3 days in his kitchen. And so he said yes. And I spent 3 extraordinary days in the kitchen of a 3-star Michelin chef, probably the top chef in France at the time. And it's huge kitchen, divided into 4 different parts. And he and his family sat at a big marble table right in the middle of the kitchen, and had their dinner before the evening service began, and I was invited to eat with them. So the whole experience was extraordinary.
That's amazing. So there is a lot of food and also a lot of very nice wines being drunk in this novel. But I'm wondering about the food. Were you inspired by his dishes when you did the research there and got to visit, or have you made them up yourself?
I was inspired by a lot of his dishes, and also by another chef called Bernard Loiseau, who he was actually the kind of inspiration for the story. He was a 3-star Michelin chef who took his own life. And I read a very interesting book about him called The Perfectionist, and it delved into his life and the pressures of working as a 3-star Michelin chef. Every chef endeavors to reach that level of achievement in the world of French cuisine, and not many get there. But once you get there, the pressure is enormous to stay there, because if you drop back 1 star, that is seen as failure. So, and I think Bernard Loiseau was in danger of losing a star, and that's why he took his own life. And so I looked at a lot of his recipes, his dishes, and also Michel Brasse, and I kind of borrowed bits and pieces from both of them and concocted my own dishes, which appealed to me. I would like to eat some of those.
Yeah, me too, I must say. Well, Blowback is the 5th novel about Enzo MacLeod, and Enzo is quite an unusual detective character. He's a Scottish-Italian professor of biology, he's a former CSI, and he takes on these cold cases, these old murder cases. And for those in the audience here, we have a really big audience. I don't think you can see them, but for those of them who haven't encountered Enzo before, can you tell us a little more about him and where he comes from?
Well, Enzo used to be, people used to say that Enzo was me. Because when I started writing that series, he was a man in his early 50s. I was a writer in my early 50s. At that time, I had a ponytail. He has a ponytail. We dressed in much the same way. We were both Scottish. He was divorced and had a dysfunctional relationship with the daughter from his first marriage. I was divorced and had a dysfunctional relationship with the daughter from my first marriage. So there was a lot there of me in Enzo. But there the parallels stop. I borrowed from, in Scotland, there's a huge Italian community. A lot of them ended up there during the war. And came afterwards. And in Glasgow, there's a huge Italian community, many restaurants, many cafes. And one of my best friends in Glasgow was an Italian. He had an uncle called Uncle Enzo, which is where the name came from. And I borrowed some of his background. His mother was Italian, his father was Scottish. And so, one draws inspiration from various sources. Obviously, I wanted to make him a forensics expert. And it just so happened that my wife went to university with a guy who went on to become Scotland's top forensics expert. So I contacted him and I did all my research through him, and I borrowed a lot of his kind of professional background to work into the character and history of Enzo. So it all came from those different sources. And of course, I built a whole sort of personal history around him, his dysfunctional relationship with his daughter from his first marriage. And he has a daughter from a second marriage, but this is a daughter that he has had to bring up on his own because his second wife died in childbirth. So he has quite a complicated personal background and history. There's plenty of family conflict in there. He's also a man who likes his wine and his food.
He's very perfect for this book.
Yes, he probably is known to drink a little too much, a little like myself,
And just like Enzo, you yourself have ended up in France. How come?
Oh. That's a long story. I started coming to France, more than 40 years ago on holiday, camping in France. And I traveled all around France with my family. And one year we found a campsite that we really liked in a town in southwest France called Saint-Cyré in the Département du Lot. And we decided to come back the next year, and that continued for several years, kept coming back. And eventually I bought a maison secondaire, a holiday home in that area. As time went on, I found myself spending more and more and more time there. And I thought, I need a bigger house. So we sold that house, we bought a bigger house. And then I thought, really I should sell my house in Scotland because I'm never there, and all I'm having to do is heat it and waste money. Yeah. So that it kind of happened gradually and by accident. And almost exactly 20 years ago, we made the move definitively to live in France.
About Blowback, I'm having some trouble to categorize it in terms of genre. It has some elements of the whodunit. We have the kind of limited number of suspects and the reasonably enclosed setting and so on. But there is also some parts resembling the police novel with a focus on the investigative process and the clues and so on. And then we have the private investigator Enzo in the middle of this. How would you describe Blowback in terms of genre?
I try not to think about what I write in terms of genre. I write under the broad umbrella of crime, and I think crime is a kind of overall coverall genre. I mean, it's very, very broad in its definition, and crime can vary from the most innocent little tale of theft in an English country village to the escapades of a serial killer in Sweden, and everything in between. And so I tend not to think about what I write in terms of genre, but I think about it in terms of story. Simply, what makes an interesting and dramatic story, and how can I engage the reader and bring them on this journey with me?
And what about yourself? What do you read? Are you a crime fiction reader?
I do read crime fiction, yes. Although I have to say that in recent years, almost all of my reading has been for research. I do huge amounts of research for my books, and I enjoy that. I enjoy the research reading, but it doesn't leave me much time reading for pleasure. It's only really in the last couple of years, and perhaps during the lockdown period during the pandemic, that I actually had time to sit and read for pleasure. And yes, a lot of the books I read were crime books, but I like novels. I like a wide range of different books, non-fiction as well.
We don't have that much time here, but I think something that we are also curious about is when we will, if you know anything about when we will see your next book in Sweden, if we will continue the Enzo series or if it would be something else. And also, I think some of the people in the audience are probably reading you in English and keeping up with your books. So if you can also tell us something about what you're working on right now.
Well, as far as the Enzo series is concerned, I wrote 6 books in that series. The book you have in front of you is the 5th book, and the 6th book in English was called Cast Iron. And as far as I was concerned, that was an end of it. I'd finished the series. Enzo had dealt with all the murders that had been written about by a French journalist, but during the pandemic, I had another book to write. I was contracted to write another book for my publisher, and I was stuck at home. I didn't know what I couldn't go and research. I was confined to quarters, so to speak, and so I had to come up with an idea for a story that would take place in the area I live, somewhere I know well. And that I didn't have to travel to research, and I went back and took Enzo out of retirement to use him as a kind of custom-made character. It fitted perfectly with what I was doing in Southwest France. He lives in Southwest France. It was a murder mystery, so he gets taken out of retirement. So that came out. When did that come out? I think that came out last year, and I've forgotten the title of it already, which is crazy. It's called The Night Gate, and it was a book I really, really enjoyed doing. It was very rich in research. Part of the story takes place during the Second World War. The other part takes place in a contemporary setting. and the two mesh together. It involved a lot of internet research because I was stuck at home, but I did enjoy that. And to be honest, having completed my contract with my publisher and having arrived at a certain point in my life and a certain age, I thought, I'm going to retire. I'm just going to spend time reading for pleasure, indulging myself in my other passion in life, which is music. I have a home recording studio, and I settled down to do all that. And then just about a year ago, just now, there was the climate conference, COP26, was held in Glasgow in Scotland, and right now it's being held in Cairo in Egypt. And I watched what was happening there, and I got increasingly frustrated, increasingly angry at the lack of action, the lack of commitment, when it was quite clear that the planet was in huge trouble and we needed to take urgent action. And afterwards, I sat down and I thought, I have to write about this. And so I went away and I spent the next 3 months researching climate change. And I made myself very, very familiar with the whole background and the science and all the divergent opinions that there are. And at the end of that period, I thought, well, how do I write about this? I'm a crime writer, and perhaps one could view climate change as a crime in some ways against humanity, but it's such a huge subject. How could I write about it within the confines of a crime story? And the approach I decided to take was not to write about climate change at all, but to write what you might consider a conventional crime thriller story, but I would set it 30 years in the future. My story is set in 2051 in a world transformed by climate change. And so that the whole background and backdrop to the story is climate change. I didn't want to preach about it because I think that puts readers off. I wanted to tell a good and interesting story with that as the background to it. So that's my new book, which will come out in English in January. And it's called A Winter Grave.
Well, we really very much look forward to reading that and to reading the rest of the ENSO books. And thank you so much, Peter, for being with us tonight. Hope next time maybe you can come here and join us in person too.
Yeah, I would love that. It's been very frustrating to be stuck at home and not able to travel and meet readers around the world. So yes, next time.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Peter May.
Thank you.